Hello everyone, this is Pilot and welcome to the first episode of MocTalks. This is a new type of video from my channel which will act as the new and improved version of the How to Build series. Over the past few months I haven't felt like people enjoyed the How to Build videos nearly as much as the other content on my channel. So to revamp this series I decided to give these videos more value by providing my own insight and opinions on each mock, alongside the how-to. So essentially these videos will act as both a how-to and a mock review rolled into one. In this episode of MocTalks we'll be building my self-moc and the newest creation to be featured on my channel, Tere, Hand of the Primes. If you end up enjoying this video, then please be sure to give it a like and subscribe, as it helps a lot towards my channel's growth. Now with all that out of the way, let's get started. So this here is the foot build. It's pretty much just a straightforward, a Nike foot design with the hand connector and all that. The only really interesting thing about this, I guess, is those clip pieces on either side of the foot. Those are connected using an illegal connection, so you'll notice that when I have the clips taken off, they're kind of stretched a bit. So there is some stress to the piece from that connection. But at the same time, those pieces are pretty easy to come by, so I wouldn't say it's too much of a loss. So now we have the lower leg. This is probably one of my favorite aspects of this build. One thing that I really like about it is how I've managed to layer all the different armor shells and everything on it. Like one thing you'll notice is how there's kind of like a lip between the CCBS shell on the front and that scroll armor piece on the back of the leg. And also the way that the knee armor sits on top of everything I think looks very nice. There's a lot of different layers to this build, which I think make it very, interesting and appealing to look at. Another thing I tried to do with this leg design was kind of give it a lot of little details scattered about and everything. Like one thing you'll notice is the Exoforce arms that are used to fill in the knee armor, as well as the little grill plates and studs on the sides and all that. I think while those details are all very minute, they help to give the mock a lot more, character and make it more, again, interesting to look at. Another technique you'll also notice here is the use of the tire pieces to fill in the ankle. That's one thing I do use a lot on this build, which is essentially just to fill in the gaps in the CCBS bones to make them look more, filled in and less gappy and everything. I think it helps a lot to improve the aesthetics of the mock and just make it look more clean in general. Alright, so now we have the knees, which, yes, Tere has knees. These are very nice because they give Tere a lot more articulation in his legs, which, articulation, if there's more of it, it's always better. So, yeah. So in contrast to Tere's lower legs, I think the upper legs are probably the weakest part of Tere's build, at least in my opinion. Since while it is a cool design, I don't think it really fits with the rest of Tere's build all that well, and it can easily end up looking quite a bit out of place. I think that mostly just comes down to how different the Paraka and Metro armor pieces look to the kind of smoother textures of the CCBS shells and whatnot. It would be nice to eventually be able to replace those with something that's a lot more, smooth like the CCBS shells. Only reason I didn't use those originally was because they don't fit on those, the lift arms that are placed on either side of the upper leg. Another neat thing about Tere is that he actually uses a modified version of the Bionicle frame for his construction. So essentially what you're looking at here is just a kind of butchered and shortened down version of the Bionicle frame. And the reason I shortened it was because, I of course didn't want Tere to be about 15 inches tall or however tall the Bionicle frame is. I wanted him to be big, of course, but at the same time I also wanted him to fit within kind of scale that my other Toa mocks have. I'm also not a fan of how this connects to the lower torso. Since the hand connector that it connects to is at his side, it kind of builds out Tere's hips a lot, which I think is kind of a weird look for him to have personally. You'll also notice a cut piece on this build, which is one of those like 3 long axles with a stud on the end, which was used to attach the 3x3 connector on the top of the upper leg. Essentially, that's just to create like a nicer transition between the upper leg and the lower torso, because like I said before, they are like connected at like a 90-degree angle. So it kind of, I don't know, creates a weird look. So I kind of had to remedy that in some way. Alright, here we are now with the lower torso. I guess the mainly interesting thing about this are the use of the pistons to connect the upper and lower torso. That's just kind of a leftover thing from the Bionicle frame, which I said before is what inspired Tere's frame. The way those are connected to the torso using ball joints and how like the axle connection with like the pistons can like extend outwards, I think allows for a lot more like extra articulation in the torso, which I think makes Tere a lot more expressive and makes him more posable in general. One thing I would eventually like to fix with this build is to fill in those open pinholes on the front of the lower torso. I have tried before to fill those in using system stud pieces. The only problem with that is they get in the way of the chest plate on the upper torso. It kind of overlaps where those pinholes are, so it's kind of hard to fit things there without, you know, limiting the articulation of the torso. I'm also happy that I was able to find those lime green ball joints to use on this build, since, you know, they obviously fit the color scheme very well and kind of help to spread that color out a bit more in the build. And now we have arrived at the upper torso, which by far is the most complex portion of this build, so needless to say we're going to be here a while. But to kind of give my thoughts on the build, one thing that I was very happy about was that I was able to keep the chest plate design from his original build. You can also see some of those vine pieces being utilized in this build as well, as kind of extra details and greebling. I think those make a lot of sense just because, you know, Tere is a toe of plant life, so I felt like it fit for him to have, you know, plants and stuff growing on his armor and all that. I'm also a big fan of the design of the shoulder joint as well, with those kind of neck pieces with the tires on them. It's kind of cool how they flex when you move Tere's arms around. And I think they give a lot more, I don't know, dimensions to the shoulders, kind of, if that makes any sense. I think without them, the shoulders would look very flat, since, you know, like the main ball joint that the arms are connected to is just a straight nylon axle that goes across the build. One thing I was sort of worried about when building this was how the head would connect, since, you know, you'll notice when this is finished being built that the head kind of connects at a strange angle, not really what most MocTalks would use. What I was worried about was that it would kind of give him a bit of a hunchback look, but thankfully, since, you know, Tere's head and mask are shaped the way they are, it didn't end up looking that way. The only problem I have run into is that because the head kind of sits so low on the torso, it's easy for some masks to kind of, you know, bonk against the torso itself, right? So if I do want to use masks on this build that are more, you know, low sitting, then I'll probably have to find some way to, you know, lift up the head to kind of give it more room to articulate. Yeah, I think that's most of my thoughts on the torso, so I think I'm just gonna let you guys kind of sit here and absorb this build to kind of, you know, get a grasp on it. Alright, so now that the upper torso is finished, we can finally move on to the upper arm. This is one section of the build that I definitely really like a lot, just because it keeps a very consistent look overall. You'll notice the repeat use of those vine pieces and the silver thorn pieces that are present in like the torso. I think it's important to kind of keep a consistent look on a MocTalks, so you know, when I'm kind of detailing stuff, I like to use a lot of the same pieces throughout the entire build. One thing that I would kind of like to improve about this build is to kind of reduce the amount of illegal connections in the like the elbow area. I think that right now there's a bit too much that's kind of just, you know, jam-packed into that area. So it'd be nice to kind of be able to keep the same look without, you know, causing stress to the parts or anything like that. And also, just like the lower leg, this also uses a lot of those tire pieces to fill in the gaps on the CCBS arms. I specifically chose to use these smaller tires in pairs, just because they kind of give that area of the arm a bit more texture, which I think makes it a little bit more interesting to look at. Now we have the lower arm. This is a pretty simple design compared to the rest of this build. I guess one interesting thing to bring up would be how this is connected, which is by 2 ball joints instead of 1 ball joint, like, you know, on most Bionicle figures. Again, that's just kind of a product of this being a modification of the Bionicle frame, but it does help a lot to kind of make the arm more sturdy. So, you know, Tere can hold weapons that are a lot heavier without his, you know, arms sagging down or something like that. And now we have the hand design. Tere, of course, like the majority of my other MocTalks, uses the green gat hand design, which gives him 2 posable fingers and a thumb. The only real modification I've made to this build is the addition of those claws. And here we have the head design. There's not really much to say about this. If you happen to have the XLR T9, you can just rip the head off of that and use it on this, since it's literally the exact same design. And here we have the wings. There's nothing too different here from Tere's previous versions, other than the fact that he has 4 wings now instead of 2. I definitely prefer the look of the 4 wings compared to the 2, just because with the 4 wings it almost kind of looks like there's a big flower blooming out of Tere's back, so that looks cool. And here we have Tere's Katana. For this build I wanted to create something that was not only kind of advanced looking in appearance, but also had some more like natural shaping to it as well. That's why you not only see things like that like tube that runs up the back of the sword, but also like the barbs and everything on the sword itself. So yeah. And the reason I specifically went with a katana over, you know, some other weapon was, one, I think the kind of sleeker aesthetic of a katana fits Tere very well. And that also, of course, is what Weapon VR used, who, of course, is a very important figure in Tere's story. And just like that, we've finally arrived at the last section of this build, which of course is the final assembly. So I guess while you watch me do that on screen, I'll kind of give some of my final thoughts about the MocTalk. Overall, I think as of now, Tere is definitely my favorite MocTalk that I've created so far. And I think it's good that I'm able to say that, given that he's, you know, my self-moc and all. I think the self-moc should be, you know, kind of the best representation of yourself as a mockist, so I definitely succeeded at that here. Now, just because Tere is my favorite MocTalk doesn't mean he's above criticism or doesn't need, you know, certain improvements or whatever. You know, I've given criticism about him throughout this whole video. You know, particularly with the thighs and the illegal connections and the elbow area. But overall, I still think he's a very good-looking MocTalk. Anyways, I hope you guys ended up enjoying this video. That's pretty much going to be everything for this first episode of MocTalks. If there's anything you think I should do to, you know, improve this series, make it better, please let me know in the comment section down below. Along with, you know, any critiques for the MocTalk, of course. The video is going to keep playing for a little longer, but that's going to be all you hear from me, so thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Did you enjoy the video? Then do your duty and give it a like. Also, if you're feeling generous, then why not embrace unity and subscribe for more content just like this. If you've already done those things, then achieve your destiny by joining my Discord server linked in the description. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.